lands these days have become so much more powerful in the past however many years. There are so many crazy utility lands coming out today that just absolutely have caused me to remove all the basics from most of my decks. And because of that, there's a lot of awesome utility lands that have fallen through the cracks that people don't really think about because they're a little niche or just not very well known. So that's why this month on Better Than a Booster, I'm going to recommend 10 non-basic lands for you to try, and hopefully you got a few decks where you can cut a couple of basics to add these in. While I was writing the script, Cool Stuff Inc. was selling the packs for $4.29, so each card on the list is individually cheaper than $4.29. But Cool Stuff Inc. actually sold out of the packs, although if you look around online, you'll find other packs for about the same price. I'm getting most of my pricing from Cool Stuff Inc., sponsor of this channel. If you use my code TTM at checkout, you'll get 5% off your order, and it supports the channel. Thanks to Cool Stuff Inc. for sponsoring the video. I love utility lands. Basic lands are great because they enter untapped and give you the color you need. But especially in 1 or 2 color decks, you don't often need that many colored pips, and it's useful to get some extra abilities out of the lands you have. So I like filling my deck with lands that do goofy things, and even if it does cost 3 mana, 4 mana to activate the land, it doesn't really matter too much. The point is, when I have nothing better to do, my landing draws me that extra card, gets me that extra creature, does one extra thing, and puts me a little bit ahead. These utility lands are not things that are going to change your entire deck and warp the way you play the game, but instead they're going to be slightly more useful than top decking a basic in the late game. And the more games you have that just kind of go a little long, go past turn 6, the better these are going to feel. Before I get into the list proper, I got another sponsor to thank. This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. You probably know that a VPN is a virtual private network, but you might not know how useful a VPN can actually be. Many of you might not know this, but I'm Turkish, and to brush up on my language skills, I sometimes watch Turkish movies and shows, like Ulumlu Dünya, which means mortal world. But unfortunately, I wouldn't normally be able to access it on Netflix in the States. But thankfully, with ExpressVPN, now I can. All you have to do is connect to their Turkish servers, refresh the page, and boom, there it is. I can watch the movie and the sequel. Additionally, a VPN can hide your online activity from data brokers or other villainous tech companies by encrypting and rerouting your data through ExpressVPN's encrypted servers. This makes it so those data brokers can't monitor or, in countries like the US, sell your data. Recently, I just got a laptop that I love to bring with me to type up scripts when I'm out sipping lattes. And now I have peace of mind knowing I'm protected even when I'm using the public Wi-Fi at the coffee shop. Is that what YouTubers do? I hate coffee and usually write scripts alone at 2 a.m. in a frantic panic to get the video out. Maybe I should try the whole coffee shop thing. ExpressVPN can also be a great tool when playing video games. Not only can you play in different regions on games like Valorant, but you can also avoid getting DDoSed in Dead by Daylight. Though of course I can't talk about gaming ever since Maldhound called me out as a fake gamer on my own podcast. But one day I'm gonna get him in a Dota lobby and his day of reckoning will come. Anyway, thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring the video. Find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by going to expressvpn.com/TTM. First card this month is Gate Wreckage. It enters untapped, you can tap it for a colorless, and you can pay 2 and a colorless, tap, draw a card. Activate only if you have no cards in hand. Looking on EDH Rec, I see this in basically just a bunch of colorless decks. And although, yeah, I get it, that makes sense, I actually think this should be in a lot more mono red and mono white decks. A lot of times, those decks do really struggle with card draw and will end up empty-handed. And if you're worried about that colorless mana, well, adding other utility lands will actually help with that. If you're in a monocolor deck, you should be able to have a reasonable amount. And don't forget, you get your colorless mana as well from Mana Rocks. A simple Soul Ring can activate Gate Wreckage. And being able to draw an extra card here and there is pretty useful. And don't forget, this card can be activated at instant speed. So you can activate it before you draw your card for turn if you somehow knew that it wasn't something that you wanted to cast. I think this card's pretty great. It's super budget friendly as well. Give it a try in your low color decks that struggle a bit with card draw. Hall of Tagsin is a card that I used in a couple of lists. It taps for a colorless, and you can pay 1 to filter into a mana of any color. Then you can pay 4, tap, create a tapped Power Stone token. Again, this is most common in colorless decks, but it's also pretty good in a lot of other places. One, it is just a land that can filter into any color, which can be useful, but once you create 1 Power Stone token, it's now a pentaland, because you can use the Power Stone to activate itself and just tap for any color. Additionally, it makes an artifact. There are a ton of commanders that just love having a bunch of random artifacts in play. Psymaster Thopterist, for example, can sacrifice artifacts to draw cards. Or a Gut True Zealot can sacrifice an artifact to make a 4/1 skeleton. And if you don't have any fodder to sacrifice, the Hall makes one for you. As with all these utility lands, it's not going to be the most efficient version of that effect, but in a pinch, creating a Power Stone can be useful in a lot of different decks. Ominous Cemetery is a weird utility land from the Doctor Who set that you might have forgotten. It taps for a colorless, enters untapped. You can pay 5, exile the cemetery, target creature's owner shuffles it into their library. This is removal on a land. Also, shuffling into the library is pretty powerful since it gets around indestructible and annoying recursive creatures. Yeah, 5 mana is a lot, but think about how many times in the late game have you needed to top deck one piece of removal to get rid of something before it swung out and took you out of the game. Well, now, every single time you would have top decked a basic, you top deck this instead and it saves you. Considering it enters untapped, I think this is pretty easy to slot into a lot of decks. Haunted Fengraf is another colorless land that enters untapped. You can pay 3, sacrifice it, return target creature at random from your graveyard to your hand. This card's pretty interesting. If you are playing a self-mill type deck, yeah, you're not going to get the creature that you want back, because it's at random, it could be anything. But it does essentially say 3 mana, draw a probably relevant card. Usually in a lot of creature-focused decks, all of your creatures are pretty good and they're things that you want. So this is potentially better than just 3 mana draw a card because you know what you're getting somewhat. Additionally, if you're playing a deck that is low on creatures, you only have a few key important ones, then you might only have 1 in the graveyard that this could get back, which is pretty great in certain decks. If you're playing something, again, maybe mono red or mono white or even mono blue, and you have a few key creatures that you want to always have on the field or get back from the graveyard, this is a way to do that in colors that can't usually return things from the graveyard. Life gain cards are traditionally not super great. You usually don't want to be spending a full card slot on something that just gains you life, since life gain is usually just not as useful as resources on the board. Blighted Steppe, though, is mana on the board and can be life gain when you need it. It enters untapped, taps for colorless, pay 3 and a white, tap, sacrifice it, you gain 2 life for each creature you control. This card is pretty sweet for a couple of different decks. One, if you're a deck that just needs to be gaining life to trigger its effects, then this is a way to gain life and trigger your effects from your mana base, which is quite good. Or if you go wide, this is an excellent way to protect you after you swing all out at one player. A lot of times in token decks, you might make a huge board, swing in at one person, and then you get hit right back because you didn't hold up any blockers and your board is really scary. You got a lot of dudes. This lets you gain a ton of life. I mean, with just 5 creatures in play, you gain 10, and token decks that are doing their thing can often get more than 5 creatures in play. And then that allows you to tank almost any crackback from other players as you swing in at someone. I think in the right deck, this card can be pretty powerful. And I would say the same for Scrying Sheets. It's a snowland that comes into play untapped, taps for a colorless, and then you may pay 1 and a snow mana to look at the top card of your library. If it's a snow, you may reveal it, put it in your hand. Now, a lot of people on EDH Rec are commonly putting this in snow decks, where their commander is a snow creature and they're playing all the snow lands and they have snow cards and snow synergies. And that's all well and good. But I think you can do that in any deck that can potentially be heavy on snow lands. If you're in a 1 or 2 color deck, playing a lot of basics, and you just switch those basics out for snow lands, suddenly this can be a late game tap, pay to draw a card. And being able to draw an extra land here and there and dig further for a non-land solution to your top decking problem can be pretty useful. Additionally, it always lets you look at the top card of your library. So if you do that and you're playing any type of shuffle effects in your deck, then you can crack the Scrying Sheets, look at the top. If it's not something you need to draw, cast your effect that shuffles and you can get rid of that. It's sort of like a scry 1. And this can happen not just with playing tutors, but if you're playing green ramp spells. In fact, that's probably one of the best homes for Scrying Sheets. You can play a lot of basics in a green focused deck with Cultivates and Kodama's Reaches and Rampant Growths. Make them all snow basics, Scrying Sheets will help you draw cards, and those shuffle effects late game synergize with the Scrying Sheets to get you a little bit more advantage. This is probably the least budget-friendly option on the list, but if you can find one for cheap, it's still pretty good. Here's a strange card, Blinkmoth Well. It's a colorless land, you tap it to add a colorless, and you can pay 2, tap it, tap target non-creature artifact. So this card is very odd, but there's a couple of specific things you can do with it that are relatively powerful. There are a certain subset of artifacts that essentially turn off when they're tapped. It's an old thing that Magic used to do. Trinisphere, Winter Orb, Static Orb all do this, which allows Blinkmoth Well to be a parity breaker with those cards. You're able to tap the Winter Orb on an end step and you get to untap everything. There is some other utility you can do by like tapping an opponent's mana rock on their upkeep or something, but really it's about parity breaking with stacks effects. Of course, if you're going to play a stacks deck, make sure your playgroup is okay with that. I'm just telling you that this is an interesting card that you could utilize in a deck like that. Back in Dissension, they made a lot of utility guild lands. They entered untapped, tapped for a colorless, and then you could spend some amount of mana and it would have an effect. And one that I think is really underplayed is Prahv Spires of Order. This land's second ability is 6 mana in Azorius colors, and it prevents all damage a source of your choice would deal this turn. Now I know 6 mana seems like a lot, and it is for this effect, right? In theory, you would want just regular removal, right? Why not play removal instead of this 6 mana one-time fog effect? One, this is baked into your mana base. It's not taking up a removal slot. You just have removal and this effect. Secondly, this is really great in a deck that wants to hold up mana. If you're already playing Azorius control type stuff and you're holding up all your mana, then it's suddenly a lot scarier if you can just shut off the damage from a certain card. And if you're playing an Azorius control deck, games will probably go longer and go late, which makes these expensive mana activated ability cards that much more useful. It's also really weird because of the way the card is written. This is prevent all damage from a source of your choice would deal this turn. So you can use this against an Aetherflux Reservoir to negate the damage from it. It's so much more flexible than just blanking one creature one time. It's very much the 38th land you add to an Azorius control deck, but I think it's worth it over a basic enough times that it's probably fine. Try it out in your Guafa Hazid control decks. Riftstone Portal almost didn't make the list because it's not quite a utility land. It's kind of color fixing, but I couldn't really decide whether or not to put it on the list, so I decided to put it on the list because the card is interesting. It's only got 1 printing from Judgment, so it's like $250 right now, which makes it one of the more expensive picks on this list, but the card is very good in the right deck. It enters untapped, taps for colorless. And then, as long as this card is in your graveyard, lands you control have tap, add green or white. I love this in a 3-color self-mill deck, like Carador or Hazazon. Since you want to be milling yourself and putting lands in the bin, this gives you crazy color fixing. When it's in the graveyard, if you're playing a Carador deck, suddenly your swamps are untapped triomes, which is really powerful. It's kind of like Anger or Wonder or that whole cycle where once it's in your graveyard, you just get all this extra utility and power from your creatures, but on a land version. It's such a strange card, and I really wish there was a completed cycle for this, because that would be really cool to see in all colors. Last card on this list is Balduvian Trading Post. It says if this land would enter, sacrifice an untapped mountain instead. If you do, put this land onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into its owner's graveyard. And then it taps for a red and colorless, or you can pay 1 tap, have it deal 1 damage to target attacking creature. This card is just under $3 and is reserve list, and is also very strange. So it doesn't ramp you, but it doesn't put you down on mana either, because you have to sack a mountain, but it enters untapped and taps for 2 mana. So ultimately it is completely mana neutral. You just have 1 land that taps for 2. And for the most part on EDH Rec, I see people playing this in like mono red lists, or decks like Jury, which wants sacrificing, or Grease and Starn, which wants the pinging. But I think this is much better in a Boros deck. You see, in tandem with white Ketchup Ramp, this card is pretty great. Because unlike the other bounce lands like Guildless Commons or whatever, it doesn't enter tapped. You don't lose tempo on a later turn, but you're still able to go down on lands and up on mana, which makes this really good with Ketchup Ramp. So if you're playing your Keeper of the Accords or Loyal Warhounds, I actually think this is a pretty sweet addition to a Boros deck. So those were my 10 choices for this month. What did you think? I think all of these are interesting cards. In the right deck, I think they can be pretty useful, and I think they are all completely underplayed. Most of these have a 0% play rate on EDH Rec or 1%, so they're not very popular. Let me know if any of these caught your eye, and if you're going to try them out in your deck, and why. Also, let me know any other cool, fun utility lands that you would recommend for this budget list. Thank you so very much for watching. Special thanks to my patrons who make these videos possible. I really appreciate the support. If you want to get in on the Patreon and check out any of the perks I have, link is in the description below.